What was the exit on Thurman?
So Thurman, it was really good. So it was about 83 million, but without private equity or venture capital, that money all stayed with the founders, with employees, with physicians, and it was so fun. I mean, I wrote checks for 5 years.
Could you tell your adoring fans what the name of the new company is?
Yeah, the name of the new company is Get Hair MD, and can't wait to tell you about it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Technology of Beauty, where I have the opportunity to interview the movers and shakers of the beauty business. And today is no exception. Today with us is Paul Herchman, a dear friend who flew in from Dallas, Texas, just to be on this show. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm so happy. You got up at what time this morning in Dallas to be here?
About 4:15. I got a lot done on the plane.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so flattered and humbled that you're here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now everyone gets to know you. So let's start with a simple question.
Okay.
Where are you from, Paul?
I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, and met a girl from Irving and have been in Dallas, ever since graduating college.
So you're born and bred in Texas?
Correct.
And did you go to school in Texas?
Went to Texas Tech University.
Yeah. What'd you major in?
I was very proud to say that I was a physical education major, but I did it in 6 years. So,
well, that's good.
yeah, I mean, I worked my way through school and was very entrepreneurial, had a lot of businesses all the way through school, and, ended up probably the sciences side of that kind of helped me in my career as I went forward.
So you got a bachelor's in PE, physical ed?
That's right.
After 6 years. And then what was your first job out of college?
I sold postage machines, and you've heard of Pitney Bowes, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
Pitney
I didn't
Bowes.
work for them. I worked for the company that had 3%.
Okay. That's where you put the letter on it, it measures it or
That's
something,
right.
and then puts the little postage on it?
Yeah, so it was one of the hardest things I ever did, and I was not very successful at it. I always almost convinced myself that I was not going to be successful selling anybody anything, but going through all the cold calling and just the brutal side of trying to build a business from nothing was really one of the best experiences that I had.
Did you walk door to door? You didn't have the internet to help you.
No, it was start at the top of a building in Dallas and go till you got kicked out and go somewhere else.
Oh my goodness. How many years did you do that?
I think I lasted about 7 or 8 months.
Okay.
And then quickly from there went to work for J&J and sold birth
we're-
control pills and vaginal therapeutics.
Wait, hold on. Now, were you married at that time?
I was.
So you were married when you were starting to work for the postage machine?
Yes.
place? Okay,
Yeah.
so you were married. Did you have a family?
Not at that time,
Okay.
but soon to come.
But a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure.
So you went to J&J, and did you do the J&J training and all that?
Right. Great experience, heavy training and, from professional sales skills to, understanding, the birth control and vaginal therapeutic side of things. But it was excellent training. But I actually got really bored pretty quickly because I was used to a more aggressive type of selling than just stopping by a physician office and dropping off some pills and asking for business.
Okay. So was that a short stint there at J&J?
I was there for a couple of years.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, I worked for a distributor in Texas called Sona Medical. And they represented, you remember Sharpland lasers?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Kochman. The CEO was Kochman.
Greg Sellers.
Okay.
Oh, wait, of Sona Medical.
Yeah, Sharpland. I lectured for them all over the world.
Did you? I mean,
Yeah.
that's, it was all gynecology-based use
Oh,
of
well,
lasers
mine
when it first started.
Oh, I didn't know that. But it was out of Israel.
Yes. Yeah.
And a guy whose last name was Kochman, I know, hired me. Anyways, Sharpland Laser. You worked for Sun Medical distributing Sharpland?
I did and sold Sharpland lasers, and Candela just came out with their SPT-L1 and sold those. And then, so Sharpland came out with a 20-watt CO2 laser.
Yep.
And most of my business at that time was in gynecology. And so I thought, I'm going to go sell these gynecologists this product for $50,000. And so I went to go call on them, and people were interested, but most of them pretty much said, Herchman, I'm not going to pay you $50,000. I hate going to the OR, but I'm not going to do that. But if somebody would start a company where I could use this one day a week or twice a month, then I would be interested in moving all my procedures to the office and doing the procedures here.
Uh-huh. So did you start a laser rental company?
I did. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So the company was called Medical Alliance, and it was my first venture into raising capital. I went to a fraternity brother that he and I were close, and he was working in accounting and was very well connected in raising capital, et cetera. So raised some capital and started on the pathway. I met a guy named Kevin O'Brien. I don't know if you're familiar with the Eclipse Med companies.
No, I'm not.
Okay, but anyway, his brother and I had worked together, and Kevin joined me in '89, and we started on the pathway there to start up a mobile surgical services company.
Okay. And was it just the lasers, or when you say mobile services, that makes me think there was more than lasers?
We expanded, so we started with CO2 lasers in gynecology, ended up in hysteroscopy in gynecology as well, and then in the probably 93 or early 90s, the development of aesthetic products began, and physicians seemed to be concerned about the cost of the equipment, and was the aesthetic business really something that was going to be sustained, and they really didn't even understand how it all worked. So we thought that was another opportunity. We diversified the business from medical surgical with gynecologists primarily into aesthetics.
Okay.
We ended up being the largest purchaser of aesthetic lasers in the U.S., built a infrastructure across the country. We were in 42 states. We were doing about 5,000 procedures a month, 42 states.
Whoa.
Took the company public in '96, and Bear Stearns was the lead on the offering. Before they blew up, it was a top tier investment banking group, and so went out, took it public, and we're NASDAQ traded, and operated with finally some cash to operate the business for a while.
And what was the name again?
Medical Alliance Inc.
And you took it public on
in
NASDAQ?
In NASDAQ in '96, right.
And were you the CEO?
I was.
And the founder?
I was, yes.
And how long did you stay in that position as the CEO?
Well, until we sold the business in 2000 to ICN in Costa Mesa.
Yeah.
And then, so they acquired us, and then soon after that, Valiant purchased ICN, and that's how they got their public platform.
Yeah, and we know what happened to Valiant.
Yeah.
That's a whole other story we're not going to go into.
Okay,
but
good.
it seems to be a common story that comes up here at the Technology of Beauty.
Okay.
Okay, so you were acquired, and then all you had was time on your hands and a bunch of money.
Time on my hands, not as much money as I'd hoped, but trying to figure out what to do. I was actually on the board of a company called Sona Med Spas.
Okay.
Because we were the largest purchaser of cynosure lasers.
Okay.
In fact, I used to run into Formoto out there raising money all the time. Got to know them, and because we were such a large purchaser, and that was the product that Sona was purchasing, they asked me to be on the board, which I did. And then we built a med spa, Sona Med Spa in Dallas, one of the first ones in Texas. And that's when I got a real lesson about the difference between selling the picks and shovels to the miners and then actually being a miner that runs the mine.
Okay.
It was quite an education.
I like that. I've never heard that analogy. Selling the picks and shovels to the miners versus being the miner yourself.
That's right. Big difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you actually were there running a clinic.
We're running
a med spa.
I was running a clinic, trying to figure out what to do, and I learned that I did not want to run a clinic, and so I decided to sell that and try to get into another venture, which I did. We ended up packaging it and selling it, but from that I learned, early on how to run a med spa,
right?
And just how the easiest part is to buy the technology, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's easy to do, but the hardest part, and it's not hard to get good outcomes with a lot of it, but the hard part is how do you make that business profitable and make money?
And successful.
Make money, yeah.
And that breaks down to a lot of categories.
Right.
And for instance, managing employees can be a huge challenge, both employee education as well as just
that's right.
back office management, right?
Totally.
And we'll get to that later.
Okay, very good.
That can be a challenge, especially for a miner, a clinician such as myself, who has no formal training in it. And most of the docs watching this can totally relate.
Right.
It's not what we went to school for, and it's certainly not, if we're surgeons, we're not really programmed to be doing that.
True.
So a lot of times we don't have too much fun. So you then decided you didn't want to do that. You were
Correct.
tired of being the miner.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I learned some big lessons.
I'll bet.
And so in 2003, I was approached by a guy that, had the idea that we should help physicians develop med spas. And when I looked at the market, I'm really kind of driven by looking for changes in the marketplace or opportunities to fill voids that might not be there.
Okay.
And most of my career at that point, with Medical Alliance, I was dealing with plastic surgeons and dermatologists.
Okay.
But when you looked at the onslaught of skincare and toxins and fillers and technologies and all of those things, and then just the demographics of people that were seeking treatment, it was pretty obvious that plastic surgeons and dermatologists alone were not going to be able to keep up with the demand that was coming their way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we thought, well, I bet this med spa opportunity is going to be an important part of the ecosystem as far as where patients can seek care. And so we brought some technologies in from Europe, and the business model was to, market primarily to non-core, but then we had a huge consulting side of our business. In fact, we had 35 consultants, and their job was to help those physicians figure out what to do, right? And they needed
how to open a med spa, how to run a med spa. So did you have courses, or how did you communicate all this knowledge to them?
Well, we had courses on the clinical side, which were the easiest.
Yes.
On
how to turn on and off the laser.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so we just had a report or some progress that we would go through, and you would take everybody step by step through what they needed to do to ultimately get to where they could run a successful med spa. We had workshops once or twice a month, and so people would come back and get access to those workshops. And we try to stay with them and help them and support them.
Did they come to Dallas to learn this, the workshops?
We would do it primarily in Dallas. Well, then as we grew, we actually then began to have workshops all over the country as well. And we, that company, it was probably one of the biggest companies I built. I think we did $70 million in revenues over about 4 years. So it was really, a great growth engine.
And what was the name of that company?
It was called MedSurg Advances.
Okay. And you mentioned you had 35 consultants. Were these 1099 consultants?
No, all employees.
So how many employees at the height did you have?
We had about 100 employees probably at the height.
And you probably did about 20 million the last year?
We were right on track with that. Excuse me.
Okay. And did you say that started in 2003?
Started in 2003. Now, the story did not end up very well for me.
Okay,
I've got to tell you.
But then that would be 2007, something happened?
Right. So, in 2006.
I can think of a few things that happened in 2007.
Yeah. And then what was coming as far as just the change in the economy, right? Which, really dealt a hard blow. But, it's really, really important as you build businesses to be equally yoked with your partners and to partner with people that you have the same belief system, work ethic, and, many things more important than even just working hard every day. And so as we built that business, I found myself kind of disjointed from others in the company that were not really functioning in the manner that I thought that they should function.
Okay.
And so I started looking for private equity and to try to change the board to have more fiduciary accountability for all of us, and especially at the board level, and looking for a transaction. And then probably a big mistake I made is I actually reached a point that I came to the board and negotiated an out for me, just because from a reputation standpoint, I just couldn't tolerate some of the shenanigans that were going on.
I understand. And so you exited,
struck a deal on the day, and then we got closer to 2008, right?
Yes.
And on the day of close, and the champagne was purchased, the private equity group walked. And you know what you have to go through from all the definitive agreements and all that.
I've just been through it.
Yeah, it's a monster to get to that point. And they walked on that day. So I went from...
And that was the closing day?
That was the closing day.
Oh, my goodness.
So, Grant, they walked, and, I went from having made a great decision to what would have been a great liquidity event for all of us and for my family to basically now fighting for control of the company. I started off with a proxy fight, came within 3.5% of just quickly getting control of the company, but did not make it happen. It was, I'd brought the line of credit. It was my name at the bank for the line of credit,
Right.
and then ended up in a legal dispute with the company. I lost my income and had, some money saved, but, I was feeding that $10,000, $15,000 a month over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time we got to the end of, really where I could have won, 2008 had hit, and the company had a lot of changes, and there was really nothing to win.
Okay.
And so I walked away at that point, but financially really, really in horrible position.
Right. Okay. Well, there's a bright ending, I know.
Yeah, there is.
Okay. So I'm curious, what happened to the company at that point? Did it implode?
It imploded.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to come back to that.
Okay.
So effectively, though, it sounds like it was somewhat of a practice management company and education. It was more than just management. It sounds like front end from kind of A to Z. When it was running well.
Right.
And when you started it, I want to come back to that
Yeah.
because there's more of those now.
Right.
And I'm kind of curious. Okay.
Uh-huh.
2008,
Yeah.
family.
I mean, we lost everything. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I was able to sell the house, and we lost because I kept investing. I've always believed in what I do, right?
Right.
And as an entrepreneur, even in the ecosystems of startups, there's venture capital, private equity, et cetera, and that's not me. I came at it from another angle. So I've always been right on the edge and driving and pushing things as hard as I could. But in this time, the music stopped, and we sold my kids' cars. We had lost their college funds, and basically my wife and I were living in my nephew's bedroom. And thank goodness I had family.
These were dark days.
It was very, very tough.
Yeah. So where did you go next?
So from there, I was really in a dry spell. And up to that point, most of what I'd done, I was very successful at. And, I think of it like a baseball player batting. If I was in the batting box, I at least got a double.
Okay.
Every hit, and sometimes, bigger than that. And then I went through a period after that, same guy, trying to do the same thing and even, more understanding of the marketplace. And I just could barely make it happen.
Right.
And we were pretty much just barely keeping the oxygen on as I was trying to fight through things.
Uh-huh.
And
I get it.
I had friends and family that, told me, "What are you doing? You need to go get a job." But man, I just don't fit. That's not who I am. And so, I kept fighting, and God bless my wife who
stayed
raised
with
our
you.
Kids, stayed with me. She's glad she did now. She may have questioned it back then, but she stayed with me, and
God bless her.
She had not had to work, for all those years, and she was doing whatever she could do, to help us get the money that we needed to just
eat.
survive.
Yeah. Okay, so where'd you go next?
Okay, so from there, I'm fighting and fighting, knowing that the next opportunity is probably going to come up.
Yep.
So in June of 2011, I get sick. I work in the yard. I ripped my shoulder lifting weights, and I'm working in the yard. My arm was all scraped up, and I went and got an MRI, and this is a hypothesis. And then from that, I ended up getting an infection in my elbow. So I'm in the hospital. Didn't feel that bad, but my elbow got totally swollen. I had this raging unknown infection, and they had to put a PICC line in and had me on antibiotics and all kinds of stuff going wrong. And the physician comes in and goes, "If you don't get better by tomorrow, you need to talk to your family and you need to make a consideration that you might not make it. So we need to see some progress pretty quickly." Obviously, I did make it, but it was totally shocking because I couldn't believe I was at that point because I didn't feel that sick. At that point anyway.
I thought you were going to say he told you he had to cut your arm off.
I would have, I guess, had he said that, but he did not.
Okay,
so I'm in and out of the hospital, and the first company that I started, 89 Medical Alliance, was a guy by the name of Kevin O'Brien.
Yes.
And Kevin and I built that company together, and the guy was really my business soulmate up to that point. We took Medical Alliance public in '96, and then he left in 97. And we competed in the marketplace, for all those years, and then I'm in the hospital. And I'm in and out of the hospital literally for about 3 months. So Kevin comes to see me every day. And so, we reconnect as friends, as men of faith. And, by the time it was all over, and I was like absolutely broke, still dreaming of, coming out of this. And, he came to me, he said, I've been praying about this and I'm going to quit what I'm doing and I'm supposed to get back together with you and we're going to figure something out. But he said, I'm totally led that that's what I'm going to do. And I felt the same way, but I thought he was crazy for joining me at that point.
As you're laying in the hospital bed,
right,
fighting for your life.
Right.
So what did you guys start?
So he came in, and at the time I was working, I'd had a product I brought over from Belgium called Nutational Infrasonic Liposuction. I branded it Tickle Lipo. And so it was liposuction, and we were weighted into regenerative medicine, taking the fat and trying to process that for, SPV, et cetera, et cetera. It was very exciting and interesting, but to have a business model that was sustainable or a business that you could really build was not really going, not really going to happen.
So what happened next?
Well, and so, we're struggling, and Kevin goes, hey, you know what? I heard of a company that a private equity group controlled a device that was it was an early temperature-controlled radio frequency device by Smith & Nephew. And so the company Neurotherm in Boston, was developing temperature-controlled radio frequency primarily for pain management, where if you had pain down your leg, they would go into your spine, locate the nerve, and then burn a lesion on that nerve to stop the communication channel and give you relief of pain.
Okay.
So here was all of this data on temperature, tissue, time, and the variability from 42C up to 90C. Mm-hmm. And they had begun to work on the concept of, the science of heat.
Right.
So Leonard Miller in Boston did some early work with that, and Brian Kinney was working with him on that as well. Well, so a new private equity group came in and bought Neurotherm, and they made the right decision. They said, we have a confused revenue stream. You've got pain management, Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, and then you've got this crazy aesthetic business. And they just could not survive under the same corporate structure.
Sure.
So they decided to sell that, and Kevin O'Brien hadn't heard about the technology and thought it was going to be a new disruptive technology in aesthetics. So we got involved, and again, dead broke, went back to some friends. I had some great friends, Grant, that loaned me money and helped me through these difficult times. I mean,
I'll bet.
It was amazing what those men and women did. So anyway, finally, and had to go back again to the well, right? Did not want to go back. And we had another offer, and I took it into my friend who had been with me on the board and helped me start, the other companies, and showed him the deal. And he goes, Herchman, you can't do this deal. You're going to lose your company the way that it's structured. And I felt that because as we got close to funding, they kept getting more and more and setting tripwires in there that, startups, you don't know 30%. You think you do. 30% of what you're planning is not going to be the way that it turns out. And so, but we were stuck because if we didn't come up with $300,000, we potentially could lose the opportunity.
Right.
But it was funny. Then I got a message from him that night, and he, again, this is a fraternity brother, and he basically, I won't use the word that he used, but he basically said, Herchman, you can't do this deal. Call me tomorrow. I'll co-sign on the note and go to the bank and fund it. So he did, and we were able to secure the technology, the design history file, and become the manufacturer and control that product.
In the aesthetics vertical?
In the aesthetics vertical.
Carving out the neuro?
Carving it out. And we use them as our manufacturer. And so it was a good deal for them because they had capacity in the plant, and most of their new technology was more sophisticated than what that early Smith and Nephew device was. But for us, in aesthetics, it was, blue ocean. There was a lot of work. There was data out there and a lot of scientific proof, but no one had ever really taken that science of heat and applied it to aesthetic procedures.
At that point, was it FDA cleared for the aesthetics indication?
Now that brings me to another story.
Okay.
So it was FDA cleared for creating lesions in nerves.
Right. I got that part.
Okay.
How did you get from there to skin tightening?
So we go to a trade show with the ugliest device on the floor and probably the ugliest booth. And we had a sign there, that we were recruiting physicians to be on our clinical advisory council because we couldn't say a thing with that approval. But there was a lot of work that had been done by Leonard and Brian and others in creating, in basically lifting the neck and jowl. But for creating lesions in nerves, the on-label application, would be to go after Botox, right?
Right.
And so to, work on the glabellar area and hit those nerves. Very painful, not a winning offering for anybody, but that's what we had. And so while we were on that floor, I knew we were very restricted about what we could do. But when physicians would come by, and Kevin and I had both been in the industry 25 years, we knew a lot of the same people, but also we knew a lot of different people, good relationships. So people would come by and we'd say, hey, we want to talk with you about helping us do clinical work, and we're raising capital. So before we talk about this, and if you decide to do this, we have some options that we'd like to pay you with so that you can do the work that needs to be done. So we had them sign an NDA, and then we also said we'd like to talk to you about investing. Well, if you're going to speak to somebody about investing, you have an obligation to tell them everything that you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So during the course of those conversations, we were able to deliver the information that they needed to understand the applications for them in aesthetics.
Got it. I read you loud and clear.
Okay.
So then you did some clinicals, and then you went back to the FDA? Did you do a predicate?
We did some clinicals, and then we used a predicate. We filed for a general surgical approval, and we got that approval. But there are others out there with that loose of of approvals, And so the cool thing about it is when we raised our money, from taking a company public, I'd had private equity, I'd had venture capital, and I'd also experienced the power and the pressure that they can have on a company as principally as a board member and representing their own shareholders. And a lot of those, at least my experience, they had no aesthetic experience at all. It was really, a great thing to learn, but it was too early. And I knew that early on we could never justify the valuation that, we thought we had. And that we wanted to raise the money with strategic people to the business. And the first place we went were to physicians because they saw what we were doing and they understood how they could use that in their practice. And so we raised capital. We had a number of tranches, and what I've always done and even do today is I try to raise enough money to clear a couple of hurdles. And
Sure.
You need to be serious about it. You need to clear them, but when you clear them, you can increase the value of the company and continue to do raises along the way. So we did a number of tranches. We ended up with about 50 physician investors, one distributor from Taiwan that wanted the product. And so we were able to capitalize the company with that strategy. And I've heard you talk about this before, but what we got from that was an amazing collaborative effort by physicians. Some of them invested and they really cared, but even physicians with options took it seriously.
Sure.
And so we had grants, so we had no IP, really, really bad FDA approval, and a company that was growing growing really, really quickly.
Why don't you tell everybody the name of the company?
Yeah, the name of the company was Thurman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Thurman, everybody. I know you all know that was the company you just described.
Yes.
Okay, so you're a couple years into Thurman. You've got 50 physician investors. You still don't have a very specific FDA indication or clearance.
Right.
And
one of the other non-approved applications that we developed was for vaginal rejuvenation.
That's right.
And
Thermiva,
right. I came and talked to you about
yes,
that.
I remember.
Right. And so, we had to develop some hand pieces. We went to a guy by the name of Red Allensod, who really,
he's right down in Orange County, isn't he?
Yeah, he understood, the device really, really well and made the proper applications so that you could enter the vaginal vault. And lo and behold, so we had plastic surgeons, dermatologists, non-core that were our customers, and no OBGYNs. But actually even J.D. McCoy had done some early work. It's the first I saw with vaginal rejuvenation, and just it worked really well. In women that had issues, we learned too that it was, vaginal rejuvenation. Your brain goes immediately to sexual satisfaction, but it was much deeper than that. You have women who, as we all age, everything moves south, and had damage from childbirth, and the older they got, they had looseness, and where you laugh, you cough, leakage, etc. And this technology was amazing on what it would do in lifting and tightening the entire area. Mm-hmm. And so there were health improvements as well along the way. So that really helped us in growth. We began to grow internationally as well. And we had not raised a lot of money. One of the obstacles to overcome as starting companies in this way, if you don't have private equity or venture capital, you're viewed at as maybe not the quality of the investment may not have been proven because of the due diligence and the process you go through with
VCs.
Mm-hmm. So the way we got past that, Silicon Valley Bank, which I'm so disappointed that things have changed for them, but when I looked at we would draw comparisons to other companies in the marketplace, and Silicon Valley Bank had funded them along the way. Mm-hmm. And so we went to Silicon Valley Bank, and I was able to get a group in Dallas that subordinated to Silicon Valley Bank, and we ended up raising $10 million at that time at a $35 million valuation. So then we got access to capital, but also we got the Good Housekeeping seal of approval because Silicon Valley Bank did a great job mm-hmm. in going through the process as anybody would to make sure that they wanted to
sort
make
of legitimized you.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Made a huge difference.
I got it.
In positioning the company for the next opportunity, to look for a strategic.
Mm-hmm. And what was the exit on Thurman?
So Thurman, it was really good. So it was about $83 million, but without private equity or venture capital, that money all stayed with the founders, with employees, with physicians, and it was so fun. I mean, I wrote checks for 5 years, or I had checks written, so I had friends.
Yes.
Well, over those 5 years,
sure.
People like to receive money for those investments.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a great day for those investors.
Totally.
Incidentally, I was not one of them.
You should have been, Grant.
I know I should have been. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Okay, so you're now back. Everything's going great. You sell Thurman. Did you stay on the board?
No, I did not stay on the board. And it's another example. So I went from running an aesthetics practice to competing, viciously, as we need to reporting to compliance.
Sure.
Because again, it was really, I don't think it's a great marriage. Big pharma, Almirall purchased us, love the company, love the people, but they're a pharmaceutical company. Yep. And they have to behave under
different rules.
Yep. And so I think I got a call from compliance twice a week. And most of the things that we did that were part of our success.
Oh, can I relate to that? But we're not going to go into that right now.
Right.
So then did you take a vacation?
You know what? I was finished.
Okay.
I thought I was finished, and my wife and I have been married 43 years, and finally we were going to be able to do things together. But man, I mean, I'd get up in the morning and I couldn't even look at her because I knew she was going to say, "What are you doing today?" And if I didn't have things to do, I was in the yard. I was picking up the dry cleaning. I was found myself, doing stuff that was I did not enjoy. I don't like gardening, okay?
Okay.
And
So every day was a honeydew day?
every day, but except pickleball. I got
Okay.
obsessed with pickleball and, started playing tournaments, still obsessed with pickleball.
Uh-huh.
But, stayed involved. I was on a number of boards and stayed involved strategically. And, Grant, I'd learned so much. And I've enjoyed, I think a lot of people can't wait to quit. And maybe it's because they don't like what they do or they're just worn out. But I've always loved creating businesses. And so you get to the end of your career, never been better connected, never know more. And so, I thought about doing one more thing. And then my son, who's 35, has the entrepreneurial disease. And, it's a tough road. It can be a really, really tough road. And so as he got older, he knew that this is something that he wanted to do. And also he admitted that he could learn a thing or two from me finally. And so I ended up, starting this company right now, Get Hair MD, and my wife gave me permission to do it.
I'm sorry. Could you tell your adoring fans what the name of the new company is?
Yeah, the name of the new company is Get Hair MD, and can't wait to tell you about it.
Okay,
We're doing
good.
some cool things.
So Get Hair MD.
Yes.
You and your son started it.
My son and the guy that was my COO and CFO at MedSurg, who ran all our consulting group.
Okay.
So he missed on the Thurman deal. He was doing something different.
Uh-huh.
And so he and I and my son started the company. Probably 2019 is when we began to design and develop, the business plan or the idea on how we could go forward.
So tell us about Get Hair MD.
So we're doing some things that are really, really different. First of all, to talk about the market, as you know, hair loss is a mother lode of a market. 50% of men, 40% of women have hair loss. And there are companies out there that are addressing it. And so it's not like others are not. But even some of the bigger companies that you may know, their approach to the market has been grafting first.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't name them, but the two leaders out there are primarily 95% men because that's where they start. And what we wanted to do is put together a non-invasive portfolio of products as directed by, I'm doing the same thing here that I did at Thurman, this clinical advisory board, because the knowledge and the support and the value you can get from physicians, it's huge in the success for companies. And so they've played a huge role in helping us select the products that are in here. And the number one rule is it's got to be efficacious. It's got to be something that you can validate, or we're going to wait before we add it to the program. So we're 51% women and 49% men. And women, it's an kind of a unaddressed market in a big way. And our company is really, really focused because 40% of them have hair loss. And look, as guys, I don't want to lose my hair, and I think most people don't. But you can look around and see there's a lot of company out there, right, with guys that have lost their hair. But for women, when they start to lose their hair, it's devastating for them.
Yep.
And a very serious concern, that they don't want to go through that.
Yep. So, what are you distributing products? Do you have clinics? What's that look like? And how far along are you? Are you still doing the raise? Are you?
Well, we are topping off the raise.
Okay.
So I funded it along for a while, and as a business guy, my kind of what I've learned, my mode of operation is nail it, scale it, and if you can do one, then maybe you can do two. If you can't do one, you've got nothing to talk about, no considerations to make. And so we focused on developing the business model. The first center we opened was in February of 2020. Okay. So, yeah, good timing.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing, right. So we were open 3 weeks. The good news, the laser was at my house, and my hair really did really well. And so then we, continued. We even learned some things in that month, and we came back out and opened our next, the real beta site now in our community in February 2020. Liked what we saw, continued to raise, continued to open centers. Then we did a capital raise in Q4 2021. And we were going to be we're building centers, right? And when you're doing that, you're back to running the mine.
Yes.
You better make sure that the money you spend has an ROI, and you better make sure that the products that you're associated with work, or it's going to be a unwinding that's no fun, right?
Right.
And so that's where we started in opening those centers, and we opened those centers in satellite retail offices in high-end salons.
Mm-hmm.
It's still an important part of what we want to do, but it's a stage 2 now rather than the leading opening of the business in those salons.
That makes sense.
So we've developed all those processes, all telemedicine and scheduling, and we were hiring the employees and doing all that, but it wasn't a scalable model. And during the course of this, there's a company called Synetics Lasers, and when I was doing my due diligence, I was able to find centers. Some of them own 7 lasers, and what I know is you don't buy a second product of something that doesn't work. Yeah, and a lot of centers that had built very robust businesses, primarily using that as the foundational treatment modality for them. And so we're going to be a customer. And as we got to know John Carrillo, who's been in this industry for 20 years, we really were simpatico in the way we looked at things and felt about things. And when we wanted to acquire him, and so we did acquire him, but it was basically a merger because he said, man, I want to take all the value and put my shares back in the company and be a part of the value creation that we intend to go through in the future. So when we did that, it kind of takes you back. Look, we try to, I know that we have to drive our value by opening centers, successful centers that have revenues, that support profitable operations.
Sure.
But the other piece that I learned from my Thurman days is by being the manufacturer, number one, supply chain issues are a real deal.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to make sure and plan ahead on the supply chain and stuff. And plus, John is a small company, and he needed to capitalize his company. And that's what I've done my entire career. So it made a lot of sense for him to be a part of what we're doing. So we're able to do that. And but when you're a manufacturer, unlike being in the center business and negotiating a favored, purchasing plan, this is totally different because the products we make, we enjoy. You know how the margins are, right?
Yeah, right.
We enjoy great margins, but that puts us in the ability, that gives us the ability to invest all of those funds
back into the business.
Sure. And so we've been able to, grow at a rapid pace. We have 2 strategies. The first was to build out a geographical area so that we can show the marketplace what it's like when 20 physicians who own their exclusive zones, by the way, all work together, advertise together, and promote themselves against everybody else in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And by having that type of platform, you're able to also explore marketing strategies that you might not explore. So we have 12 centers in DFW, and we accomplished that pretty much up until last year. And then we decided that it's time now to expand across the market, across the U.S. Mm-hmm. And so, the first calls I made, I'd been talking to Barry DiBernardo and Jason Posner for probably 6 months or so. Mm-hmm. And, then they both purchased their zones in December. And we began to, plant those flags to grow across the country because we are, while I'm raising $2.7 million and I still have $1 million left to top it off, which we need to do to be more aggressive in things that we need to do to make the business perform at the level that we want it to perform. But our strategy now is to continue to build out DFW as an example to a future strategic or private equity that wants to build 10,000 of these zones.
Gotcha.
Now, the reason I say 10,000, we looked at the marketplace, and this is one of the things that got me off the couch and off the pickleball court to come back and do this. From being involved in this industry and selling devices to physicians, the way it is. You go to your friends, the people you know first, they graciously buy your device, and then you go around behind them and sell their 25 closest competitors the same device.
Right.
And you probably say, well, Grant Stevens just bought this, and if you want to compete with him, you need to do this, right?
Right. Oh, do I know that well?
Yeah. And I hated that. I think physicians hated that. I don't think anybody really likes that. So when we did an analysis of this market, and we looked at the 83 million people that had hair loss, and then we filtered out all those that were too old, some too young, and then we took that next number and we filtered it through household income. And we limited, by the way, anybody that made $100,000 or less we took out, and we assumed that they would not be purchasing, the package. It's not really true, but for the sake of that,
for your model,
we did that. Sure. Anybody that makes over $200,000, 100% of them are in, and then in between there was a blend. But we looked at that number, and it would take 11,700 Get Hair MD treatment sites performing at double the capacity or double the number that we try to guide physicians to have a really, really profitable business to treat. It'd take them 5 years to treat all those patients. And so it just made sense. The market would already be, if we do that, it'll be a company far bigger than any company that I'd built in the past. So in working with physicians, they pay $250,000 now. That price will be going up. And we finance that equipment, typical leasing financing. They enjoy Section 179. Then they get all the technologies, all the services, all the processes. We spend $30,000 in marketing their practice, which would be the introductory of Dr. Barry DiBernardo, Get Hair MD. And we have a lot of things that we do. We continue to add other solutions and products into the mix. And then we go about helping them. We think of it as a Starbucks kiosk in an airport or in a grocery store. So we set up the Get Hair MD kiosk in one of their rooms, and then we use our business process. It's a lot like we did at MedSurg, a business in a box that is supported by purchasing the technology.
Now, since you sell this to limited people, physicians and so forth, in a limited geographical area, and you've mapped out the country or the states and so forth, what if a med spa came to you as opposed to an individual physician? Do you have limitations on who you will sell that to?
We do not. I mean, look, we're interested for this to be successful. First of all, a physician has to be associated, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So
associated with is, in every state is different.
Is different,
right?
Yeah.
So that associated with definition, depending on what state you're in, changes. Okay.
Right.
But so, for instance, you mentioned Barry DiBernardo, one of the most regressive states in terms of physician involvement, New Jersey.
Yes.
However, in Nevada, Arizona, and so forth, who can run these med spas.
Right.
I'm just curious as you go through this, and I'm thinking of Orange Twist, and I'm thinking, could a company like Orange Twist purchase a contract such as this? You mentioned having an area within their clinic, or you mentioned building it sort of within a box, box in a box.
Right. That's right.
Could, hypothetically, a company that has, say, 15, 16 med spas, could they come to you and say, we want to purchase this package at all of our spas, assuming they don't have any overlaps and so forth geographically?
Absolutely. In fact, as you know, the market has changed in regards to physicians' practices being acquired and groups forming, et cetera, in a big way. And we have we just installed our second center with a group, and they own 11 centers now and hope they go to 24. So their idea.
Are they on Texas, all of those?
They're not.
Okay.
They're not, and I can't tell you.
That's fine.
Who they are at this point, but their ideas are. First of all, they have 2 centers, and so now they're going to look at it, right, and show and see that it works. That's their beta
to see if it works.
That's their beta, right. But the strategy with this look, I know what we're going to do as a liquidity event, as the manufacturer, the provider, and all the things that we do. I know.
Are they one, or are they just separate companies?
They're separate. Now, the physicians that work with us, like right now, and the same thing with Thurman, the earlier you were in, the cheaper the price was, and the more options you got, and the more work we had you do. And so, like right now, as a reward for physicians that open up new markets, we give them double zones. And like, for instance, we make sure that each zone has 5,000 people that have hair loss, that are not too old or not too young, and can afford to pay for the service.
I follow you.
All right. So we try to guide businesses to, look, we're telling them if you can do sell 75 packages a year, you've got great return with that. But that would be 1.5% of the 5,000. So they have plenty of geographical area and plenty of people in those zones to sustain from now on, really. But the idea is to get people going, build the brand. We want Get Hair MD to be the most trusted brand in hair loss. There's a ton of confusion. There's a lot of products out there that are even supported by big marketing and big ad campaigns, but when you look at the results, I think it is questionable. So coming back to the physicians that are in, that's why that's their job, is to go through what we're doing and make sure it's something that they validate is effective. And so as we begin to grow in really into this year, now we have centers in New Jersey and Boca, Raleigh, Honolulu, Little Rock, Birmingham, Alabama, and and then we've got a lot of interested parties right now. But I would love to talk with companies that are trying to build value, because that's what we're trying to do, is build value. And I know again, we're building this company. We will go for a recapitalization of the company. It could be a liquidity event or maybe partial. I don't really know. But our objective is to have 100 centers up and running by 2024. And Grant, the other thing I've learned is to be very, very disciplined to your EBITDA. I think a lot of companies don't do that. And I've got burned by that in the past from, trying to do a transaction to be, find out that our EBITDA, was not accretive to what they were doing or any of the business that they were building. And nobody wants to do something that's dilutive to them. And so we're real disciplined on that. And the other thing is, look, we're a partner with physicians, if I can use that term. And we want the physicians to know that we're going to be extremely profitable and that we alone can be a good partner because they're dependent upon us to make sure we build this nationally and then internationally. And so we will have the resources to do that.
And it sounds like if you do well, they do well, and vice versa. So it sounds like there's synergies there.
Yeah, and the other piece I'll tell you is, look, after Thurman, with 150 option holders and 50 physician investors, you end up having a lot of personal conversations with people. And a lot of it was about, well, what do I do? What do I do about my practice, and how can I get a liquidity event? And of course, now you see what's going on. But unfortunately, a lot of physicians don't have the revenues or the EBITDA to interest
private equity.
In fact, I think the majority of the market don't. And so we actually went to a group and that's involved in that. They were heavily involved in the dental roll-up, and they're involved in the med spa roll-up, and they're an advisory group. So, we went to them and said, look, help us build these businesses and structure them in a way that the physicians that own their Get Hair MD satellite offices can be a part of their own roll-up. Because the thought was, if we do build the brand the way that we want it to build, we don't care who our partner is as long as they're equal to or better than the physician that was in there. And I applaud physicians, and I think that they should develop strategies to have a liquidity event, or they're just going to shut the door.
Right.
And that's a travesty to do that. That's another part of this that is a ton of fun for us, is to at least, it's kind of like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. We'll see. But at least we're trying to build this and operate it in a way that, and we'll be prepared for when somebody says, who wants to be a part of this roll-up? And they would probably step to a medical director role or something. Then, we'll have the due diligence ready because we know what to do. And we do the banking, accounting, auditing, as well as the same brand and processes and all the things that somebody would want to do to have standardization across that network.
So when someone pays you that $250 for that, you're providing all that back office support?
Yes.
And are they separate from that 250? Are they leasing the devices?
They lease the device.
Right.
So to them, it's just a typical monthly payment. And I'll talk about that because, look, we're in rocky times right now, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and I've been through 2008.
Yep.
Other times, right? And so, what I've done is I want to make sure we're extremely capital efficient with the dollars that we raise, and I try to run our business in a way that we can be cash flow break even, which we are, and a very low hurdle to be cash flow break even. But then for the physicians, as I explained to them, this brand, they're in early. This brand is nothing at all what it's going to be when we have hundreds of centers out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so their break even off that leasing payment is one patient that buys a package from their existing patient base. When it's someone from their existing patient bases, whenever we're working and spending our money to drive patients in there, we get a return.
Sure.
We get some fees. We take $1,500, but we take $750 of that and invest it back into marketing for that practice, because you want a perpetual machine as best you can. And we take the other $750 that goes into the corporate marketing budget to also try to drive, overall recognition and brand, et cetera.
Sure.
Right.
What a fabulous idea this is. And we had Paul Gaynor on the show, who is the CEO of Orange Twist, and he was talking about building new centers, potentially acquiring new centers. And we were talking about similar concepts.
Right.
I want to be sure I introduce you to Paul.
Please.
Because there are some inherent natural synergies there for sure.
Yes.
Also, are you providing subscription type services for your people when they sign up? Is there a monthly fee? And if so, are you the bank, or are you financing it elsewhere? Because I have another idea for you.
Well, I think I know what it is because I watched Todd Watt.
Yeah.
And I talked to Todd. And we're in the middle of using Patient Fi, and then we've had other companies out that have worked with us to a degree, but we've formalized a process now where it's going to be selling the monthly payment, and then we're trying to figure out to move into the subscription model for us as well. Because as you know, with hair loss, it's kind of like going to the gym. You just don't go 3 months.
Right.
It's a long-term.
It's a lifestyle, right?
It's a lifestyle, right?
Yeah, you don't just set it and forget it.
Right.
It's a commitment.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
And I think, look, I actually watched Todd's interview with you. Again, I'd heard him speak at Octane. And, just.
So full disclosure, I did bring this today. And you know what Privy is?
No.
It's Todd's Subscription Aesthetic Services. So it's a different set of Patient Fi.
Okay.
So Privy is their subscription service.
Perfect.
And people are enrolling in a subscription. It's dynamic. I could go through all the attributes, but I won't. And notice who's working with Todd.
Well, look at that.
Well, looky there. So I would love to hook you up with Privy and Patient Fi, but and Todd, great organization.
Yes.
They're well capitalized. They can help you, and I think they could be a little of the fuel or gas in the engine for your company.
I totally agree. In fact, I just told my president today, let's make this conversion, because Todd, those guys have already set us up. And now it's time to make the conversion and the implementation into, the centers, because I saw the stats on the difference that it makes on selling the monthly payment versus.
I'm presenting that on Friday in Nashville at Scale.
Are you?
Because I was one of the early ones with HinMD.
Yeah.
And so I have all my data. And do you know that, Paul, when the first 600 patients I put into a subscription aesthetic service, the net proceeds per patient, $1,271 a year, per patient. And all we did was put them on a subscription. They increased the number of hydrofacials, they increased the number of Botox per year, they increased the fillers, and we just looked at those three things. Clearly, everyone had over $1,000 a month of additional revenue per existing patient. This is not going out getting new people.
Right.
Just by making it accessible, affordable, and guess what? Instead of being therapeutic, non-therapeutic, non-therapeutic, they were therapeutic all year long. They were happier, they looked better, and they came in more often because it was these convenient payments every month.
Right.
Off their credit card.
Yeah.
No difference than your iPhone, your Netflix, your gym membership, your car payment, and everything else that we are all so used to, these subscriptions. But why not? So why not subscription aesthetics?
I'm a believer.
And we've demonstrated it. We did it with Galderma and demonstrate. We do it with Allergan. We've done it with different hydrofacial. And it wasn't a one-trick pony. We did it with multiple offices and multiple physicians. I am telling you, it's the way aesthetics will be consumed and purchased here as we move forward. It's so easy, and this system here, Privy, is dynamic. It's frictionless.
Okay.
It can also use big purchases instead of these small ones.
Right.
It's a very great product, and I encourage you to talk to Todd Watts and his people at PatientFi and Privy.
I will. In fact, I'll make another call when I leave here, get my team to
maybe
get on
we'll
it
do it
fast.
together and have a cup of coffee.
Perfect.
Well, I want to tell you, it's been an absolute joy.
Thank you.
To get to know you better.
Thank you very much.
You and I, our paths have crossed so many times, but we've never actually worked side by side.
That's right.
I do want to talk to you about that investment, and I want to talk to you about your company.
Thank you.
But we need to move on.
All
So
right.
I want to thank you for getting up at 4 a.m. and taking the time and trouble and flying all the way to LA. It's been an absolute joy.
Well,
so
thank
you very much
you
for
including
coming.
me.
Yeah,
Appreciate
you're
it very
very
much.
welcome. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today on a wonderful episode of The Technology of Beauty. And as you saw, I had the opportunity to interview a mover and a shaker of this wonderful aesthetics business. Stay tuned for more wonderful, exciting things from Get Hair MD.